I've had different times where I've phrased conversation with the idea of, we have a thinking part of us and we have a feeling part of us.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of growing up or differentiating, if you go psychobabble, is being controlled by neither.
Okay.
Right. By bringing both into play. And so here's another phrase I just came across in an email that I got this past week that says, some people are ruled by their beliefs. They will torture themselves for the sake of an idea. Others are ruled by their emotions. They will change their mind 1,000 times in search of what feels good. A healthy mind acknowledges both, but is ruled by neither. I think that's a good way to kind of continue the conversation about how there's the variety of different ways we come about trying to just thrive.
Yeah.
And not even recognize sometimes I am getting in my own way all the time. Actually, maybe all the time I'm getting in my own way all the time. Well, welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Corey Allen alongside my wife, Pam. We're having honest, straightforward conversations in a mobile studio today.
Yes.
As we are in big transitions with our family. So if you're on YouTube or not usually, you want to check it out because there is a video of the shows and you can get different backgrounds this whole time now.
You never know what you're going to get.
Exactly. Well, we're trying to have straightforward, honest conversations about married life and love and sex and how we can be ruled by neither, but enjoy them all. How about that?
There you go.
That's a good kind of setup for where we're going today.
There you go.
And if you want to join the show with your questions or your thoughts, or even as a call-in, because we're going to be setting up some call-in segments that we can have more time to dive deeper into and collaborate with the listeners, not just take it where we think it will go, but have it be as part of a conversation. 214-702-9565 or feedback@sexymarriageradio.com is how you can let us know what's going on with you. And then as well as we can go where it will help you the most. And if you like the show, please leave a review, rate and review, leave a comment, do it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, however you listen. We want you to join us and help us spread the word that married sex is the best sex that there is. So, well, coming up today on the regular version is a follow-up to 2 weeks ago, where we did an episode on power and oral sex. And there's a guy that emailed in that he's like, unless I misunderstood you. And then he's got some pointed statements about what we talked about on just how it landed. And then there's also another email that came in that's kind of the opposite of another email that came in from a younger couple that are talking about a different kind of baggage that you can have when it comes to your marriage and how you've entered it that would in some ways be the opposite of the purity culture.
The opposite.
And that message.
Okay.
Right. And so it'll be kind of an interesting dive into, let's look at it from a slightly different lens, although I don't think it's all that dissimilar.
Okay. Opposite of purity culture makes me have all kinds of thoughts of what that could mean, but okay.
Well, stay tuned.
I'm interested to find out.
And then on the extended content today, which is deeper, longer, and there's no ads, you can subscribe at smr.fm/academy. We're going to jump into, for one of the masterminds, a guy posed the question of, is sex a want or a need? So we got into a pretty good conversation in that group, and we're going to pivot it to the show.
I've got my thoughts on that.
And so all that's coming up right after this. So this is the email that came in. We'll just jump right in. So this is the email that came in. So we'll just jump right in. That this is, hello, I'm a fan of the show and wanted to comment on the case of the gentleman that wrote in as someone who's in a similar position to him. And this is the guy that was wanting his wife to be involved and enjoy oral sex the way he does.
2 episodes ago, right?
Right, from 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So unless I completely misunderstood your answer, it seemed to be a long roundabout way of saying, just get over it, do your part. And if she comes around, she does. And if not, then suck it up, which is fine. But it seems everyone ties themselves up in verbal knots trying to answer this question to men rather than being direct. There's freedom in directness like that, and it's more actionable and comprehensible for a man, being that we're more direct in our communication usually. I'd love you to discuss this subject more in depth with another episode and consider my feedback, because I'm sure many others who may write in will have, this is also a massive topic for a lot of men. Mm-hmm. So thanks for all that you do.
So to be short and to the point, and just answer and not get it in verbal knots.
Verbal knots, which is true, because how often do we have these issues that happen in married life, particularly our sex lives, where if you put it in the context, and first off, we got to kind of go macro with this, because first off, if you think about it, we are in a dynamic where marriage is sacred, right? The world will outsource things, right? Just go do it elsewhere, get out of your marriage, whatever. And it's kind of flippantly handled that way. They don't put the same kind of commitment level and covenant level on marriage that we will as a show, right? That's just kind of a general value we have. But we also will stop short of saying, here's what you should or shouldn't do with people. So we use that as a framework, but we don't use it as a way to say this is what a person should or shouldn't do, because they have to do it according to their value, their moral structure, their commitment level.
There are things you have to figure out for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of verbal knot tying that happens when we get caught in these issues of you're largely stuck. And until you come to grips with recognizing you're stuck, you're going to even feel even more stuck. So
fair.
To answer his question without trying to do the verbal knots, in some ways, you do just have to get over it or decide how you want to proceed in the marriage or not. I mean, that's largely how it falls out. If it's that big of an issue, that's what you're facing.
And so you have to ask yourself, is it that big of an issue?
Right. What makes it such?
Where is this?
Because a lot of times we have it tied to something deeper than just like the act in and of itself. Because if it is just the act in and of itself, what does that say about you?
Yeah.
Right. Because some people put more value. You and I've had this conversation in our marriage is intercourse more intimate than oral sex, right? Because there's an element of oral sex is more intimate because it's more revealing, or it's more, so it's just this element of everybody comes down on different, what means what to them.
I got you.
Right.
I got you.
And so sometimes we can put it up on this pedestal of that's the one thing that speaks the most to me. And why don't they speak that? Like I wish they would. And that's just what happens in marriage. Just change this context and insert different topic.
Yeah, whether it's taking out the trash or the finances or,
taking out the trash, equating it to oral sex. I get
I wasn't even going there, but okay, that's kind of funny that you went there. But yes, it's exactly that. Each of these little things that we can insert into that line, where is it on your continuum of importance?
What's the meaning attached to
you?
It? Because if you think about it, this is a phraseology that I've got from Schnarch's newest book that the manuscript was just released in the last couple of weeks, that he talks about the main things that where we feel the most tension and pressure are the high meaning issues. And so when I'm in a dilemma of a high meaning issue for the guy that wrote in, and then the guy that's following up, is having a vibrant, engaged spouse when it comes to an aspect of our sex life. And in this instance, from 2 weeks ago, it was oral sex. So a high meaning of that value makes it all the more troublesome when it's not in line with what you want.
More meaning for the one spouse, not necessarily for the other.
Well, but oftentimes you got divergent meanings, right? Because she could see it as, no, it's either disgusting or I get nothing out of it. And the fact that I get nothing out of it, knowing that you do, that sends a different message of meaning, so it's just, there's a lot of things exposed in this that ultimately what he's facing, to not try to still do verbal knots, because we're still doing a little bit of verbal knots in this, is I'm not getting what I want in this aspect of my marriage and my sex life. So in some regards, the more and more I try to push and pressure her, less likely it's going to be beneficial for the both of you. So in some ways, you've got to examine what makes this such a meaning thing for me. Have I conveyed that as cleanly as I can? And then I just got to let the chips fall where they fall and get over it if it doesn't go the way I want, because I still have to make the choice every single day of I'm going to be a little disappointed, but everything else is worth this. Because we do this in all ways of marriage. well, you don't want to do the travel I want to do, but it's still not worth making as big a deal about it because the rest of this is totally worth it.
Yeah.
And that's the paradigm we use on everything. It just gets so much more intensified when we get into our sex life.
Yeah.
But it's no different than taking out the trash or doing the dishes or a cleanliness of a house. So it's the same fundamental concept. We make it such a big deal. Let's keep going then. My husband says, I've been listening to SMR for about a year. My wife and I have been married for 5 years now. We were both virgins until marriage, but we still had very different backgrounds surrounding sex and sexuality. While she grew up in the midst of the purity culture, I came from several different high schools and colleges where I was continually the only Christian in the middle of a very sex-positive environment and received lots of sexual attention from women throughout my teen years. I know many of your listeners came from the generations before the internet or in a culture that was much different than that of today. But I believe that in many ways, today's young men and women face different challenges. For example, cliteracy and differences between male and female orgasms were all well taught and discussed in and out of the classroom from middle school onward for me. The idea that a man is not good in bed unless he knows how to give a woman an orgasm was well established and discussed among my peers. While I know I'm fortunate to have started marriage ahead of the curve, we've had a set of hurdles that seem slightly out of the norm from what I've heard from your listeners. Despite all my efforts and quote-unquote textbook techniques, my wife could not reach orgasm for about a year into our marriage, at which point we purchased a toy which resolved that issue quickly. Now she can get there without the need of outside help, but only with about 45 minutes of manual stimulation if it's no help, is what I'm kind of reading in this.
Okay.
So I'm well aware of the pressure that pressure is the last thing to help the situation. I always did my best to keep things positive and exploratory. However, she could still blame herself. We've grown so much, largely thanks to your podcast. But now that she's more confident in her sexual self and we've learned more about her body, I'm realizing how much I struggle with the feeling of inadequacy. I'm having a hard time keeping my confidence up when so much of my masculinity was built around the idea of a man's ability to please his wife. And I feel as if it's because I can only get her there manually after a long time that I've only achieved the bare minimum of where we should have started in the first place. She doesn't understand how important it is for a man to be validated as a sexual stud, to not only be confident in bed, but but also at work among other men. I know this is a lot and it has many nuances to unpack, but thanks for the opportunity to work through these things.
This is a fabulous email. Thank you for emailing in.
Right.
Talks about a lot of different gamuts.
Right.
That there is an opposite side of this, right? The purity movement telling us, wait, don't do it.
And
a lot of shame
and guilt.
A lot of shame around it.
It's negative and bad. Yeah.
I really kind of like the perspective he came into this with. And I think he was ahead of the game coming in. They've been married 5 years. And I would want to, my initial reaction is wanting to just provide encouragement of, man, you're on the right path already. And you've figured out things and you're being a student. You guys are being a student of your body, being a student of her body. Well, I'm assuming you're being a student of your own body as well. But being a student of her body and trying new things, which is a lot of people are just stuck in a rut, right? I don't want to do a comparison game, but a lot of people are too afraid to even bring that up, have that discussion, introduce a toy if they're not getting somewhere. So I want to throw out, I'm sure you'll have other things, but I wanted to throw out this affirmation of kudos to you.
Right.
For taking advantage of the positive aspects that you had learned beforehand and jumping into that.
Yeah.
Because that says so much more than that says a lot about what you think about the relationship, what you think about your spouse. To me, that says you're being a student of your spouse. I
love your positive spin here.
How you do sex is how you do life. You don't see it. Okay. So I'm interested in your take because I know there's multiple sides to this, but I see a lot of positive in this.
Yes, there is. And it's a lot more relationally positive, sexually positive overall. But personally speaking, here's when the way I'm reading him is he has loads and loads of other validation tied to this aspect of his life.
Because of you're not
You don't
Great man
understand how important it is for a man to be a sexual stud.
a sexual stud.
Okay, so I think of
Okay,
this
yeah,
as
okay.
what society all too often does is I like to think of things in the form of a bell curve in general
Mm-hmm.
of what goes on in our world, because it's just so much easier to conceptualize and visualize that for me. And if you go on the one end of the extreme, that was the purity culture. Because the hard and fast rule of a bell curve is the extremes are the different forms of crazy. But in the middle, we have a lot of room for normal, if you will, or for average, or for what is helpful and beneficial.
Okay.
So on one end of the extreme is the purity culture. Well, the other end of the extreme is way too sex positive, focused on my spouse and being able to achieve something with them, because it's just a different kind of pressure on her
And him?
and him. Right. Well, and an identity on him.
Gotcha.
But he was raised in this, whereas he was not. And so they're coming into this with the exact same dilemma every couple has, to varying degrees, of I view a different meaning attached to something as it pertains to our sex life or your sexuality or mine, and so
Yeah.
I'm just hearing all of this as needing to unpack, what does he have so tied to my identity and value and even worth is so corollary to her sexual pleasure, rather than her sexuality at face value is hers.
Fair.
That's it. He gets to enjoy that. And so how does he become a student alongside her rather than I am the teacher of her? Because that's kind of the way
That
I'm
is
hearing.
a very good point.
That's
Yeah.
kind of the way I'm hearing this has come across. Probably not ever intentionally, but I would assume, based on our journey and my education years, that there were many times I could take a stance with you of, let me teach you, honey, when I'm in the graduate school world, right? And that did not go well at all, particularly if you didn't ask. If you asked, I could get a little bit of ground on.
I don't remember you ever saying that or doing that.
It's a persona that I would take. I can visualize it easily of moments when you would bring up something that you were struggling with, and I'd be like, I know how to handle this. And that's just an inner talk that's going on.
Sure.
And I would try to convey it in a way that's not like professors at the lectern. Now, here you go, baby, pay attention, take notes. But it's like this element of, that's almost what this feels like, because he has so much tied to, and it's not just because he's further along, he has more tied to his identity based on it.
Got you. I'm processing this in my head. So there's an extreme then of being a student, and where am I trying to go with this? Get away from
it's trying to be a student of himself and her, because the whole focus has been, there's a couple statements that talk about this. That first off, I'm just pulling these from the email. She has different baggage than you. This is my phraseology.
Okay.
Right. Namely, how she views herself. And then for him, it's how does he view her and himself? Right? Because she also has a view of him, but it may not be as constricting, troublesome, because it's largely, I'm speculating here, her focus is largely on what's wrong with me. Why can't I get, because
why does it take 45 minutes?
Right.
Well, and on that note, I'm diverting you a little bit. It sounds like the focus is orgasm.
Yes.
And wow, sometimes it takes 45 minutes for her to get in, to get into it. And maybe every sexual encounter doesn't have to end in orgasm. This part of this sexual stud idea, and me being a good husband and a good lover in bed, means I have to get my wife to orgasm.
Right.
And it doesn't have to happen.
That means I
every
passed
time.
the test, rather than knowing I came in prepared and it went however it went, and I'm still good.
Right. And she's probably still good too.
Right. And it changes the different kind of a dynamic on the pressure that's there.
Yeah.
Because the focus is different. So that's one of the concepts. But then two of his phrases that jump out is, he feels that he can only get her there manually after a long time. And because of that, they've only achieved the bare minimum of where they should have started in the first place. That's bringing into this context of we should be so much further ahead of this game than we are.
You're
rather
only
than
5 years in, Guy.
yes, but also I'm going to be curious to wonder, to just be blunt, like the first emailer talked about,
Mhm.
what is struggle and role and culpability in this? Because my hunch is the focus is, why can't she get there? And then secondarily, what's wrong with me, right? What's wrong with
Yeah.
my technique? What's
Yeah.
wrong? Rather than both of those are happening simultaneously, and they both should have equal weight if you think about it.
Okay.
Because it's not just about technique. I mean, I can do something right sexually or professionally or whatever, and it doesn't land. It doesn't work. It doesn't produce the result we want. That doesn't mean I didn't do it right, but I'm tied to an outcome far too often that then I put my value based on.
Yeah, I agreed. And it feels like there's this regret of, we should have been here so long ago. We should have been here from the very beginning. Well, everybody starts somewhere, right? And this is part of the journey. Figuring all these things out, if you don't go through struggle, you don't learn the beauty of being on the other side.
And to pivot it towards your positive that you started it with, that's the landing that he needs to land on more of. Look, we've tried to be open about things. We've tried to be exploratory about things. That's what you enhance, because that's more based on, let's see, let's be curious, let's learn. And I even heard a phrase just the other day of, I either win.
Yeah, I don't lose.
Right.
I only lose if I don't learn from what happened. Yes.
Right. And so if I can go into instances, and maybe we don't think of this too often with our sex lives, I'm going to try this out as an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to learn something either way. I'm going to learn it was very, very enjoyable. It was great. Or that didn't go as well, but what can I learn about that? What was going on with us? What was going on with me? What was going on with the situation? Because there's so many factors at play, particularly when it comes to our sex lives, because we can't recreate something that was fabulous as easy as create a scene that maybe creates the possibility for it.
Yeah.
And then see where it goes.
Yeah.
But I constantly hear, this is other validated language that he has to realize. What's challenged here is, how does he get more self-validated in close context with her while she's probably trying to do the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Don't rely on her to boost you up and let you know that you're a sexual stud. Although it's nice to hear that, know that what you're doing, you got to be good with that within yourself.
Yeah. And that's the element of the language you use with yourself and your own self-talk when things go well and when they don't. And then the language you use with each other. Because how often do we do I was really hoping for this. Yeah, I know you were. Yeah, you're disappointed. Oh, it's fine. It's like, no, it's kind of owning things better.
Yeah.
To see it as, yeah, I think I was more tied to that than I needed to have been. That's an immediate, I just tipped the scales back to me a little bit off of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to come to grips with that. And now the next instance that we have together will have a slightly different feel, most likely, because I'm approaching it differently, because I'm bringing myself differently. And he still can stay the sex positive. One of my hopes and goals still can be, I want to focus on her. I want her to have all kinds of pleasure, because I think a lot of men do get a lot of pleasure out of providing pleasure. That's just the way it goes. There's a power stance that comes with that a lot of times, and knowing I'm capable of doing that. That's a good thing.
Sure.
But hold on to that goal lightly. Maybe it doesn't go there, but it doesn't have to ruin things. And you both can come out of this thing with this idea of, that was still pretty good. And we both learned something.
Yeah.
Win-win.